If you're a Power Rangers fan, you may be familiar with this guy. This is Haim Saban. He is the businessman who founded Saban Entertainment, and once during a trip to Japan would fall in love with Super Sentai. When coming back to America, would produce the 90s beloved franchise that is the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. He became a household name in TV land. It eventually would help merge the News Corporation's Fox Children's Network with Saban Entertainment to make Fox Kids worldwide. He would be at the helm of the show's process until 2001, when he sold Fox Kids Worldwide to the Walt Disney Company for a whopping $5.3 billion.
And Haim Saban got $1.4 billion from the sale.
But he would buy back the franchise for only $43 million in 2010. And coincidence, that is after Disney bought Marvel. You know, they were going to do their MCU thing. But when Saban got back the franchise, the show entered a Neo-Saban era and found the show going into a new direction and an old school rule system. The show would have reached new creative lows after implying this rule system that made the show more formulaic. And after the bomb that was the 2017 Power Rangers movie,
he would sell the franchise to Hasbro for $522 million.
And even though his touch on the show is still felt today, we can all be in agreement where he was the guy who ruined the show. But what about back then when Saban was the one creating the show? Isn't, you know, the guy who ruined the show also the guy that made the show? That proved everybody wrong and became a successful businessman? Well, like a lot of productions in Hollywood, Saban was the one that just went public, because definitely he wasn't alone in all this. Because there was one figure who gave the green light to Power Rangers even exist in the first place. And her name is Margaret Loesch. Hey, what's up everybody, it's Este here, and today we're talking about the woman who saved Power Rangers. She is not talked about a lot in the history of the show, and today, I think it's time to give her some spotlight. I want to give a quick shout out though to two articles I used for making this video. First was Margaret's interview with Emmy's Television Academy, and also Eric Francisco's Inverse article. They were both amazing reads. I hope you go check them out in the description down below. But we gotta know, big question, who's Margaret? Well, you may not have heard of the name, but you known and seen what she has done. She started off in the early 70s working at ABC as a clerk typist. And to be honest, I didn't know what a clerk typist was, but I looked at Indeed.com and it says, clerk typists keep timely and accurate records, transcribe information, and help with general office operations. Pretty boring, but you know what? She was working in television in the 70s, a growing industry. It's probably a great place to be. And you know what? She didn't even study television growing up. She studied political science. How the turntables. After making some connections in the network and working her way up to the promo department, a work friend eventually got her a job at NBC, working on their children's programming, such as The Pink Panther Show. And being an executive and manager had gotten her a lot of praise in her time, alongside being one of the few female executives that was running the industry. She definitely took the competition by storm. Now, her work at NBC was definitely noticed by some big clients of hers. More specifically, Bill Hanna and Joseph Barbera. Do you guys know who that is? Hanna-Barbera cartoons, you've probably seen a few. They were an animation studio, creators of shows like the Flintstones, the Jetsons, Yogi Bear, and any other cartoon your boomer parents probably talk about when there were only 5 channels. Oh, and Scooby-Doo too. Now, Margaret eventually worked her way up to becoming the head of children's programming as a whole, and eventually an executive vice president. That's crazy, am I right? And with this new power, it was time to take some risk. At the time, she was managing 13 shows a year on 3 different networks. And as these 5 years of her life went by, she was definitely on the lookout for the big new thing. And one of these things was the Smurfs, a co-creation with the Brussels creator of the comic strip, Peyo. And the people at NBC weren't going for it, saying how they all looked the same and should be different colors. The show also featured no laugh track and music different from the cartoons of yesterday, but albeit, it was a success. And the opportunities would keep coming because in 1984, she would leave Hanna-Barbera to join Marvel Productions and work directly with Stan Lee.
So I came up with Gooner Man, and I yapped to chat. I got this great edge streak. I want to call him
Gooner Man, and he's a Twitch streamer.
Which, you know, the creator of Spider-Man and many Marvel characters. Now, it definitely isn't the Marvel of today with all those MCU shows, Disney Plus adventures, Disneyland stuff, none of that. You know, it had its comics, but it was also making productions for other television shows as well, and helping other companies with their own brands, you know, kind of join the big 80s rush of, oh, shows based off toys. And to be the CEO and president of that company is definitely crazy. She got to work on shows like My Little Pony, G.I. Joe, and Transformers, all with Hasbro. Foreshadowing? Oh, and she also worked on Muppet Babies, which was one of her dreams when she was working on Hanna-Barbera. But here's where the comic book writer Stan Lee comes into the picture. The latest series, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, wasn't really doing so well in the US. But you know where it was doing great? Japan. Now, thanks to a Marvel Comics ambassador in Japan called Gene Pelk, he got to understanding Japanese culture linking back to Spider-Man. So when Spider-Man was popping off in Japan, Marvel Productions was working with Toei Company. They were already working for them with their animation department, but Toei also said, hey, we have this, live action show that you might want to look at. And with Toei being the ones who make anime series like Dragon Ball, they definitely gave it a look. And when you looked at its live action department, you saw stuff like the lone hero of Kamen Rider, and of course, the colorful team that we love, Super Sentai, which the head of the live action studio, Mr. Yoshinomori Watanabe, saying that the series was a hit in Japan with hopes for international success. So there was kind of like a deal. It was like, we'll trade you this for this. So what the deal was basically Toei would have permission to make their own tokusatsu version of Spider-Man, while Marvel Productions would have the rights for Super Sentai in the United States and would be able to do a show of its own. And this is notable considering that Stan Lee had a liking of a specific Sentai series, Taiyo Sentai Sunvoken, which Marvel actually helped Toei finance. They initially loved the show on its first look, considering its craziness as well as action combination. And after workshopping it, they managed to compile $25,000 to cut up a few episodes, add some US voices, make its own story, and try to sell the show. They managed to make a presentation and show it in front of what was known as the Big Three, ABC, NBC, and CBS, to which all of them denied their drafts. Executives at those networks called it terrible, violent, cheesy crap, with Margaret defending the show for its silly looking monsters, and how their idea of any kid becoming a superhero is a good concept, but to no avail. And sadly, Stan Lee would have to call up Japan once again, very sad disappointment, saying that they failed in bringing Super Sentai to the United States. They gave the rights right back to Toei. Comic question of the day. If you were to make your own Sentai before Power Rangers, what would it be? Personally, I gotta give it to Flash, man. I think the suits are funny, and it would have been a great 80s comedy family show. I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below and leave a lock to lock in your answer. Guys, I'm gonna go for a big one. 2,000 likes for this video, and I'll do more like this one. I'll put my thumb down now. But also, you may be asking, why didn't they ask Fox? You know, Fox is a big local channel. Why didn't they ask them? Well, Fox really wasn't in the equation until at least 1994, and we're still in the 80s here, so they are still on the come up. But you know where Margaret ended up next out of all these companies? It was Fox. And in 1990, she joined the team of Fox Kids, and one day found herself in the offices of the man who ruined Power Rangers, aka its creator, Haim Saban. Now, at the time, Haim Saban wasn't, known for Power Rangers yet. He was known for working with his partner Shuki on theme songs for many various cartoons at the time, like Inspector Gadget. But funny enough, he would actually work with Marvel Productions in their own animated series. You may know it as X-Men. And Margaret had kept very close ties with the people over at Marvel Productions, saying, hey, when I go to Fox Kids, I'm gonna do all the shows that we weren't able to do at Marvel. And X-Men was exactly that, keeping to her promise. And Fox Kids was a huge success, being different from other networks by having a before and after school kids block, which made the network slowly be able to compete with the Big Three. But now Margaret herself was in search for the next big hit over at Fox Kids. She was thinking about something to air at 7:30 in the morning that combined action and comedy. And well, when you're in the office of Haim Saban, he rushed out to get a tape and brought back Super Sentai. In fact, it was the same footage that Stan Lee had showed Margaret many years prior. Haim Saban founding of Power Rangers is a story of its own. He originally saw this series on a trip to Japan at the Hotel Television, and that series being Chodenshi Bioman, and dollar signs immediately popped up in his head. Later grabbing the rights himself after Stan Lee bought him back to Toei. 90s kid blocks at the time in the US had a rise of dubbing Japanese anime productions, and Power Rangers, if anything, was an interesting move in how they adapted it. Haim Saban did actually try to bring Super Sentai over to the US with his own adaptation called Bioman, which, when brought to the Big Three, was denied. So Margaret and Haim teamed up, and along with Haim's wife, they were really the only ones behind this idea, all being denied years ago, and now they're looking at the same fate. Things were definitely scary. The bosses at Fox were not playing. They did not want any part of this show's creation, but they were gonna allow it considering Margaret's previous successes. So with the help of a repackaged Bioman pilot, now titled Galaxy Rangers with Jew Ranger footage, someone finally understood a chance of something. And luckily enough, the show was doing great on kids focus group. That's when, you know, they were having test groups with kids watching the show, see if they liked it. And you know what, hey, we're gonna give you $100,000 to do the show. $100,000 was very much low and cheap to make a pilot of a kids show. Power Ranger episodes today have multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars in their budget. So Haim Saban actually mortgaged his house to put another $100,000 into making the pilot. But they did it. The original Day of the Dumpster, not even the whole 22 minutes. They could only have done about 17. And what they did was obviously use Japanese footage from the recent show Jew Ranger while splicing it with American actors. And it tested great. And the boys were obviously going crazy because, you know, action and dinosaurs, they were loving that. But you know what Margaret found out? The girls were actually enjoying it too. Two girls were actually having a discussion about who's better, the Yellow Ranger and the Pink Ranger. And they came to the conclusion that they both kick butt, they're awesome. And Margaret was like, this is it. This is the one. So Margaret was on her way to making the show, but she said that she could only fund $15,000 for an episode, surprisingly low. But she wants a merchandising cut. Because that is where all the real money comes in. We know the Power Ranger toys were flying off the shelves, they were doing live shows. It was a licensing giant. So that probably was a good idea, and you know, Saban definitely did step up for that one. What followed was a dissection of the recent Jew Ranger series, taking away the serious aspects of ancient human tribes, guardian beasts, witches, and Satan for a more Americanized show of high schoolers featuring valley girls, geeks, and martial artists, all having a double life as a team of monster fighting superheroes. And Margaret would step further into the conversation when it comes to making the initial Power Rangers show, saying that, hey, we needed some comedy in this, and she was the one who eventually led the way into making Bulk and Skull, the legendary comedic duo of Power Rangers. But all of this finicking around with the show definitely made both Haim and Margaret stressed. Like, was this actually gonna work? The cast of the show was definitely clueless on the Japanese footage when watching their fight styles. The stunt crew didn't even know how putties would work, so they actually had Sentai stuntmen come over and show them how it's done. There was a lot changed from the initial Jew Ranger, but every time Power Rangers would come up in these test groups, they would find that more kids would be in love with the show. But network pressure from Fox and Fox Kids was still very much in hand. And with the advertisers, the people that put commercials in the show, they were not impressed about Power Rangers either, saying that they were very unhappy about seeing the show. And according to Inverse, Margaret even received a telex. I don't know what that is, by the way. I think it's a fax. Google? And got a message on how 4 of the biggest Fox channels around the country were not going to be airing Power Rangers because it was too violent. Please don't put this on air was one of the messages that she received. You can imagine all the stress levels happening in that studio, but you know what? She was putting all the chips in the bag. She said that, you know what? If the show fails, I got a backup. Spoiler alert, there was no backup. And you know how the story goes. The show premieres and becomes #1. It was played every day on Fox Kids at 4:30 weekdays and 8:30 a.m. Saturdays. Toys were everywhere. There was traffic all over LA to see Power Rangers live. And the cast of characters, all while being heavily underpaid, were turned into kid celebrities overnight. Margaret got that hit. But not any hit, a Mighty Morphin hit. That was bad. I don't know why I wrote that. But Margaret, even though the show was being successful, was still getting flack for the show, but she was still protecting it though from day one. She was even called to Washington DC because senators and people were complaining about the show being too violent and how the show was rotting the brains of children everywhere, saying that it was making them hyper and disturbed. The show definitely had sparked controversy on censorship in kids shows, which ultimately led to a law passing that kids blocks on local channels need to have certain hours of educational and informational content, something that would kill the whole concept of children's cartoon blocks just 2 decades later. Now Margaret, as you have seen, may be strong, but you know what's stronger? The E-Squad. Y'all know the drill. Subscribe and ring notification bell to join the E-Squad today, the biggest Power Ranger fan base growing ever in life. E-Squad comment of the day. Leave a funny comment down below, put the E-Squad in it, and you may most definitely probably be in the next video. But what happened to Margaret after Mighty Morphin? Well, after season 1 of the show, she stopped reading every script and forcing decisions onto the show, and would ultimately leave Fox Kids shortly after MMPR's run ended in 1997, and would go on to become the president of the Jim Henson Television Group, and later the Hallmark Channel. And in the 2000s, she made her own TV company with Bruce Stein called The Hatchery, which made shows like Zulu Patrol, The Haunting Hour, and Dan Versus. And for 5 years, she was the CEO of the Hub Network, Discovery and Hasbro's collaboration channel, and since 2016 plays an advisor role for the executive chairman of Kid Genius and Baby Genius, later rebranded to the Cartoon Channel. Honestly, she's done a lot of work. Let's just let her advise for now. But the most wild part of this story is how everything was connected. It was all coincidences. Like NBC working with Hanna-Barbera, Hanna-Barbera working with Marvel, Marvel working with Fox Kids. It was just all just luck and the domino effect for Margaret. It was brilliant. But let's end with a quote from David Yost, the original Blue Ranger, and truly honor Margaret's work on the show. Because he said, "She was the one person from Fox that believed in the show when everyone was like, what are you talking about? We owe her so much because she got it on the air." Guys, she was a legend, and even the late JDF, the original Green Ranger, even posted up with her on the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers red carpet, and on this Instagram post saying that she was the one who gave Saban a chance for the show to launch and allow it to become the sensation that it was. Truly a beautiful picture, and I hope you guys definitely learned a nice story today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Dino Fuego. I'm also on Instagram, Not Don Fuego. Have a good morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you're at. And of course, as always, stay awesome, everybody.
Like, subscribe for more. Peace out.